Hello Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes. We probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And today's topic is about a real-world event that may have inspired Tolkien's conception of Eregion, Moria, and the Ring of Power. And since those are heavily featured in the upcoming Rings of Power series, I thought it'd be a good time to chat about it. But first, some folks asked for my thoughts on the latest official Rings of Power trailer. I think this might be the 5th trailer. There was some new footage in it, yes, although much of the new scenes were merely different angles of scenes from earlier trailers. None of the scenes particularly changed my theories about the show. But I'll say this, I am somewhat surprised by the lack of Sauron in this show. He's mentioned, and we see minions, but many think that if he shows up in this season at all, it'll be in the finale. Maybe he's disguised as another character, a la Anatar. I hope so. A couple of commenters brought up the idea that he may be disguised as many characters, which would be very engaging if that came to pass. Our featured first season villain is apparently the elf Adar, a brother or relative of Galadriel, and supposedly not Sauron in disguise. I did think it was interesting that if he is indeed the first season villain, why wasn't that actor at Comic-Con? They brought most of the major cast, but not the season's antagonist? Maybe he had a conflict. But I feel like there's a bait and switch in here somewhere. And as long as I'm talking about Adar, I find it odd that Adar's black armor costume is the latest cover art for the Return of the King book. Unless he actually is Sauron, which again, he apparently is not, he has absolutely nothing to do with Return of the King. Remember that elf we made up for the Rings of Power? His armor looks cool. Return of the King. I don't know. I'm like, what? Anyway, I thought the Comic-Con trailer was better than this last one. And at this point, I'm just ready for the series to start. So let's do this. Series. On to today's topic. Tolkien's possible inspiration for Eregion, Celebrimbor, Moria, and the Ring of Power. This isn't a state secret, so if you know about this already, my apologies. I didn't learn about it till recently, and I did think that's a fascinating connection. Could this just be a coincidence and have nothing to do with inspiring Tolkien's work? Yes, it could. Though if so, it's a pretty big coincidence. Okay, let's set the stage here. The year is 1928. Tolkien is 36 years old. It'll be another 8 years before he publishes The Hobbit. He's already fought in World War I, during which time he started writing The Fall of Gondolin. And he's already taken a summer holiday to the Swiss Alps, which he later credited for his vision of the Misty Mountains. By 1928, Tolkien is well into his academic career, having the position of Professor of Anglo-Saxon. And it's that title that leads him on this fortuitous academic journey that he seems uniquely qualified to take. In 1928, a husband and wife team, the Wheelers, excavated an ancient Roman temple complex in Lydney Park, which is in Gloucester, England. Like most archaeological sites in England, this site has a series of different cultures all represented in one area. There's an Iron Age hill fort, a nearby hill has a Norman castle, and at one point, this area, commonly known as Dwarf's Hill, was a Roman iron mine, and there are still abandoned caves and tunnels running throughout the site. But at some point in the 4th century AD, the Romans closed down the mine and erected a temple. Not just any temple. This was a Roman temple to a Celtic deity, Nodens. That name doesn't show up very much. In fact, it really only shows up in one other site in Lancashire. And the Wheelers found that this temple to Nodens contained several Latin inscriptions. The name Nodens wasn't that familiar to them, so they called on the Professor of Anglo-Saxon to investigate the nature of this temple and this deity. And boy, did he ever. Tolkien ended up writing an appendix to the Wheeler's excavation report, a paper entitled The Name Nodens. So the inscriptions at the temple are where the story really takes off. Many of them are simply recorded transactions. One reads, "To the god Mars Nodens, Flavius Blendinus, weapon instructor, gladly and deservedly fulfilled his vow." Well done, Flavius. But one of the inscriptions was written on a curse tablet, which sounds terribly ominous. A curse was recorded at this temple. I've seen a few minor variations on the translation, but in essence, the curse reads, "To the god Nodens, Silvianus has lost his ring. He has given half its value to Nodens. Amongst all who bear the name Senekianus, refuse thou to grant health to exist until he brings back the ring to the temple of Nodens." So a local named Silvianus lost his ring, and apparently he had good reason to believe that someone named Senekianus now possessed that ring. So he dedicated half the value of the ring to this temple in order to have the god Nodens curse Senekianus with ill health until he returned the ring to the temple. Now, in his research, Tolkien equated Nodens to the Celtic mythological figure Nuada, the Silver Hand, first king of the Tuatha De Danann. Nodens, Nuada. Tolkien decided that Nodens was a hunter of some kind, noting the number of offerings at the temple in the shape of dogs. And the last bizarre piece of this puzzle is that Silvianus' lost ring was actually found. It was dug up about 80 miles away in Silchester. It's a gold ring, a signet ring, depicting an image of Venus, and it's now in a museum. And the reason people know it's the ring in question is the inscription. Apparently, after acquiring this ring, Senekianus had it inscribed with, "Senekianus, may you live in God." So let's put all these pieces together. Tolkien is researching a cursed ring involving a mythological figure based on Nuada of the Silver Hand. Celebrimbor is Elven for Silver Hand. And the site of this temple to Nodens Nuada is an abandoned mine called Dwarf's Hill. Sounds strongly suggestive of Moria. And notice how the curse says Silvianus lost the ring. It doesn't say Senekianus stole it. He might have won it in a wager. But the ring was lost. And also notice that the curse on the wearer of the ring, Senekianus, can't be lifted simply by returning the ring to Silvianus. The only way to lift the curse is to bring the ring back to where the curse was made, the temple. Is this a one-to-one correlation to Tolkien's mythology? No. But I do think some story ideas crept into his brain from this research. And to further state that case, I'm going to read a passage from a letter Tolkien wrote to his son Christopher in 1945, right before the end of World War II. In it, he's responding to Christopher's admission that he is particularly moved by Celebrimbor's story. Tolkien knows why. But before I read the letter, I need to read you something he references, of course. He references Gandalf's words about the Palantiri in the Two Towers. Just so you get the reference, here's an excerpt of that text. Gandalf in the Two Towers. "The Palantiri came from beyond Westerness, from Eldamar. The Noldor made them. Fëanor himself, maybe, wrought them, in days so long ago that the time cannot be measured in years. We had not yet given thought to the fate of the Palantiri of Gondor in its ruinous wars. By men they were almost forgotten. Even in Gondor, they were a secret known only to a few. In Arnor, they were remembered only in a rhyme of lore among the Dunedain." So, take in those lines while I read you the passage from this letter. "There are two quite different emotions. One that moves me supremely, and I find small difficulty in evoking. The heart-racking sense of the vanished past, best expressed by Gandalf's words about the Palantir. And the other, the more ordinary emotion, triumph, pathos, tragedy of the characters. That I am learning to do as I get to know my people. But it is not really so near to my heart, and is forced on me by the fundamental literary dilemma. A story must be told, or there'll be no story. Yet, it is the untold stories that are the most moving. I think you are moved by Celebrimbor because it conveys a sudden sense of endless untold stories. Mountains seen far away. Distant trees never to be approached. Or if so, only to become near trees. So that's a revealing look at what Tolkien and his son were passionate about. He had a somewhat difficult time feeling a depth of emotion for his characters. It was the heart-racking sense of the vanished past that moved him. The untold stories. Gandalf talks about the forgotten lore of the Palantiri. When Celebrimbor died and Eregion was sacked, so much lore died with him, like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. So to take it back to Dwarf's Hill, Tolkien did his best to revive the name Nodens. That was the title of his paper. That temple to that obscure name is part of that vanished past he described. And I do find it interesting that apparently the ring went from a follower of the Celtic deity Nodens to someone who inscribed it with, "May you live in God," showing how the old gods were being replaced, passing into forgotten lore. In any case, as you see Celebrimbor's story unfold in the Rings of Power, or in the pages of the Silmarillion, you too can now speculate whether it's connected to an essay Tolkien wrote about a mythological figure named Nodens. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll talk to you next time.